Sleep, the make or break of mental health. Sleeping wrong can derail your mental health. So how can you nail bedtime? It was 1959, and radio personality Peter Tripp was sitting in a storefront in Times Square. One wall was almost completely glass. Onlookers could peer inside and watch Peter as he performed a publicity stunt meant to boost listenership for his show and raise charity funds for the March of Dimes. Two researchers accompanied him, watching carefully to see how this stunt would affect Peter and the human mind in general. Peter stared into a plain-faced clock on the wall, squinting through tired eyes. Then he turned to the researchers. "Everyone believes that I'm Peter Tripp," the DJ said cryptically. "But I'm not." What was this publicity stunt Peter was pulling, and what was it doing to his mind? In today's episode, you're going to find out what happened to DJ Peter Tripp and what it has to do with your own mental health. I'm your host, PJ Aubrey, and regardless of who you voted for, your gender beliefs, your vaccination status, or the color of your skin, we're so glad you're here. We created a survivor's guide to hell to combat a worldwide decline in mental health. Here at SGH, we believe there is no better way to save our world from chaos, corruption, and decline than by healing our minds. Let's take back our world, one brain at a time. Part 1. Why brains need sleep. When it comes to psychology, there are few topics more fundamental and more mysterious than sleep. Why is sleep so important that our bodies basically force us to do it? It's because our brains need the rest, right? Well, not exactly. When we sleep, our brains are still incredibly active. Some research suggests that brains are more capable at handling math problems while we sleep. Other research tells us that the brain goes into a sort of housekeeping mode, clearing away toxins that build up in our waking hours. Perhaps the most accepted explanation for why our bodies need sleep is memory consolidation. One fascinating study followed a group of rats through their day at the mazes. As the rats were tasked with navigating a maze in search of reward, researchers monitored what was going on in their brains. In real time, they could see what neurons were firing while the rat snuffled along its path. The scholars were able to track brain patterns and develop an intimate understanding of what systems the rat implemented in order to solve the maze. Yeah. Rats and mazes, we've heard that before, right? Here is where it gets interesting, though. The researchers didn't shut their laptops after the rats had run their race. They continued monitoring the little guy's brains even after the animals had fallen asleep. Matthew A. Wilson, associate professor of brain and cognitive sciences in MIT's Picower Center for Learning and Memory, said this about what they discovered.
We found that brief segments of awake sequential experience were replayed in the hippocampus at high speed during slow-wave sleep, following awake behavior, revealing the early processing of sequential event memory during the sleep period.
Okay, so what does this mean in plain English? The same parts of the brain that fired while the rat was in the maze were replaying in the rat's sleep. The patterns the researchers saw in brain activity while the rat navigated its puzzle looked to be set on a high-speed repeat while the rat snoozed. After it awoke, the rat was again able to repeat these mental patterns and complete its maze much more efficiently than it could have before it went to sleep. So what does this mean for humans and our sleep? Well, Wilson had an answer for that too.
Work in humans suggests that amount of slow-wave sleep early in the night, as well as the amount of REM sleep later in the night, is correlated with subsequent enhancement of performance on learned tasks.
In other words, the quality of sleep you get each night will improve the memories you acquire during the day. This includes episodic memory, or the kind of memories that allow you to recall different scenes and events in your life. Sleep also improves explicit memory, which means it helps you retain information you made deliberate efforts to learn. For example, studying for an exam. Then there's implicit memory, which includes subconscious information that your muscles can use instinctively, like how to ride a bike or how to unlock your phone. Sleep helps with all of these. I remember discussing this rad experiment in my high school psychology class. Later that day, I went home and decided to get some guitar practice done. The Beatles' Blackbird was high on my priority list. So I sat at the edge of my bed, my beloved blue electric acoustic in my arms, and I started picking away. Blackbird was particularly difficult for me. Most songs I'd encountered included chords and strumming, meaning all I had to do was get my fingers in the correct spot on my left hand and keep a rhythm as I strummed with my right. I'd usually have a few beats before I had to rearrange the fingers on my left hand to play a new chord. Blackbird is different. Not only does your left hand have to press some unusual string combinations on the guitar's neck, but your right hand doesn't have the lazy luxury of strumming. Rather, several of your fingers have to pluck the right string or group of strings at the right time in a somewhat complex pattern. Meanwhile, your left hand is rearranging itself for every beat during huge portions of the song. So while the fingers on one hand have one pretty complicated job, the fingers on your other hand have a completely different complicated job. Pro guitarists can do it with ease, but I'm not a pro. It was a lot to ask of an amateur guitarist such as myself. Using one's hands take up a massive amount of the brain's real estate. Humans are completely unique in the animal world, even when compared to other primates. And they can move in a near-endless set of combinations and complexities. So, to use all my fingers on one hand in a different configuration than the fingers of my other hand, and to constantly change that configuration several times a second, that was a massive amount of neurons firing in that brain of mine. And I couldn't do it. I tried the same succession of notes again and again and again, and then I tried them again, and I just couldn't hack it. My fingers started to feel like semi-frozen hot dogs, and the coveted Blackbird was not the song coming from my guitar. The light through my basement window was getting dark. My back and shoulders ached, and my fingertips felt as if they'd start bleeding at any moment. Frustrated, I put the guitar down and got ready for bed. About 9 hours later, I rolled over after a solid night's sleep. Morning sun had come to replace the fickle moonlight in my window well. The first thing I saw after a stretch and a yawn was that damn guitar, and I knew I wasn't done taking a hack at Blackbird. With the residue of frustration still in my mind, I set the guitar back on my lap and resumed my practice. What happened next was downright miraculous. My fingers moved like they each had their own tiny little brain. My left hand glided over the guitar neck like a hot knife through butter, each finger loose and exact as it pressed each string with precision. And my right hand? It had the Blackbird pattern programmed right into its muscles. The rat's in the maze, I thought, recalling yesterday's psychology class. My sleeping brain has cemented my explicit and implicit memories. I'm the rat in the maze. It works! I still didn't have the song down to perfection, but the number of my mistakes had plummeted. My speed and accuracy skyrocketed. Within the next couple of hours, I could play Blackbird, and I have no doubt in my mind that I had a good night's sleep to thank for it. What with college, kids, and career, I haven't been able to keep up with my guitar practice. But even if I haven't picked up a guitar in 6 months, give me a few minutes to warm up, and I can still play the verses of Blackbird. So together, we have officially learned some leading theories on the nice things sleep can do for our mental health. It can help clear toxins, keep the mind sharp, and solidify all kinds of different memories we collected in our waking hours. Here's the next question. What happens when we don't get enough? To find the answer, we're going to explore the story of radio personality Peter Tripp and what happens when you go 200 plus hours without sleep. Every time you listen to our podcast, you're joining us in our mission to take back the world one brain at a time. When you listen and subscribe, it helps the almighty algorithms put our show in front of more people. Please pop that subscribe button so you never have to miss a show and we never have to miss a listener. Really, we like you a lot. Part 2. Why Peter Tripp was trippin'. Peter Tripp wanted more listeners. It was that simple. And I know how he feels. He was a radio personality in 1959 at WMGM, who you may now know as ESPN. It seemed time to do something creative to boost his listener base. Something edgy. Something big. His stunt of choice, staying awake for over 200 consecutive hours, was given a cute little name, Wake-a-thon. Its consequences, however, wouldn't be quite so cute. The radio station called in some sleep psychologists to monitor Peter. At first, they advised him against the stunt. No one on record had gone so long without sleep, and without any data, the psychologists worried that the results could be catastrophic. But Peter didn't have to twist their arms much. With his willingness, the researchers would be the first to document how the human brain reacts to extreme sleep deprivation. In the end, the researchers were all in. For much of the experiment, Peter would be broadcasting in a storefront right in the hustle and bustle of Times Square. Some have described that storefront as a glass box, where onlookers could peer inside, nose against the glass, and satisfy their curiosity with a glimpse at the DJ who wouldn't sleep. Peter seemed to be handling it well. By all accounts, he was confident and relaxed as the stunt began, completely unfazed by the warnings. Throughout the entire publicity stunt gone case study, he would perform his scheduled broadcasts, and listeners could tune in for signs that the man was losing it. His two psychologist teammates took shifts to ensure Peter stayed awake and to keep him out of immediate danger. And impressively, Peter was remaining composed by day 2, even 3. His broadcasts sounded pretty normal. However, by day 4, things began to slant. His off-air personality was what began to deteriorate first. After about 100 hours without sleep, Peter Tripp was no longer able to perform simple math problems. He couldn't even recite the alphabet correctly. At hour 120, he began to hallucinate. It was time for a little break. The disheveled DJ left his glass box, strode down the pavement, and entered his nearby hotel room. Perhaps he threw a longing glance at the bed before climbing in the shower to get whatever semblance of rest he could in the running water. Then out he went, leaving the bathroom and opening a drawer in his dresser. I imagine the DJ shouting and stumbling backwards as violent flames burst from the drawer. The scientists did this, he thought, catching his breath. But the sleep researchers had done no such thing. In fact, there was never a flame in the dresser drawer. It didn't matter to Peter. He began to believe that they were conspiring against him, trying to torture him out of completing the stunt. And he still had several days to go. Research participants had gone without sleep before and had similar symptoms to Peter. However, those studies stopped at about 100 hours. The DJ would now require stimulants to keep him awake. The hallucinations kept coming. He saw spiders crawling into his shoes, Imaginary mice scuffled about the studio floor. At one point, he believed he could see his friend's face in the studio wall clock. Then he wondered if it was his own face. Then, he doubted he was even Peter Tripp at all. Peter's paranoid feelings grew like thorny weeds in his mind. And when one of the researchers turned up in a dark overcoat, Peter ran, panicked, out of the studio. He was convinced it was an undertaker, come to bury him. He had to be dragged back inside. The researchers concluded that Peter's mind was literally entering REM stage while he was still awake. REM stands for rapid eye movement, and it is the deepest stage of sleep a human can experience. The average adult will experience 3 to 5 cycles of REM during a good night's snooze, and it's during this phase of sleep that we do most of our dreaming. To have REM while you're still conscious? It's mind-boggling to think about, but it does explain Peter's intense hallucinations. He was literally dreaming on his feet. By day 8, Peter had become hostile, attacking the sleep psychologists and generally being insane. At 201 hours and 10 minutes, the stunt was finally over, and Peter indulged in 13 hours and 13 minutes of sound sleep. The torture was over. Peter woke up shockingly normal, as if the sleep had flipped the switch in his mind back to the sane setting. Some say the experiment had long-term effects on Peter, which would lead to divorce, the loss of his career, and other devastating events. But skeptics point out that many of these personal tragedies were in the works before Peter performed the Wake-a-thon, and I tend to agree with the skeptics on this one. Other people have since surpassed Peter Tripp's record for sleeplessness. In fact, in 1964, a teenager named Randy Gardner abstained from sleep for 264 hours for his high school science experiment. Sleep experts accompanied him as well, but Randy didn't report such epic events. He still hallucinated, but he saw more pleasant, fanciful illusions. At one point indoors, he saw a path leading to a gentle forest. At another point, the white teenager believed he was the black running back for the San Diego Chargers. Randy's life did not fall apart after the experiment had concluded, and thanks to his stunt about 60 years ago, he's somehow generated a measure of celebrity in Japan. These sleep deprivation stories are fascinating. They tell us a lot about the body's real need for sleep. However, none of us are likely to face 200 hours without Z's. You and I are more likely to confront a different set of challenges. Insomnia, for example, is a common sleep disorder that makes it difficult to fall and/or stay asleep, leaving insomniacs with series of nights of low-quality rest. Then there's the busybodies among us who live on a caffeine drip and don't clock in enough hours in bed. And of course, all of us occasionally experience a night where stress, discomfort, or any number of other factors prevents us from getting the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep. What do these more common forms of sleep deprivation do? And how can we combat the negative effects? We'll look at some solutions in part 3. Stay tuned. We believe there's no better way to protect our world from chaos than by healing our minds. But for that, we need to reach a lot of people. If you want a quick, free way to support us, please leave us a review on Spotify, iTunes, or Audible. This will help get our name in front of more people and help all of us take back the world, one brain at a time. Part 3. Our top 3 tips for getting a good night's sleep. So, sleep experts do recommend 7 to 9 hours of sleep for the average adult. Everyone is different. You may feel groggy if you don't hit that 9 hours, while your spouse might feel rejuvenated at the opposite end of the spectrum. The older you get, the less you typically need. Many seniors are perfectly happy with just 6 hours of slumber at night. But what happens to our mental health when we consistently fall short of our brain's ideal number? As you may have guessed, your ability to remember, and thus your ability to perform, is going to suffer. That's why sleep experts don't recommend cramming for that exam late into the night. Without proper sleep to help you solidify your memories, you're likely to forget a lot of the information you miserably devoured the night before. But memory certainly isn't the only thing to suffer. Those who get too little sleep are statistically more likely to have problems with focusing and decision-making. They are more likely to be anxious and depressed. Quality of life drops. Sleep deprivation tends to aggravate symptoms of pre-existing mental illnesses, making things like social anxiety, phobias, and OCD even more difficult to handle. And of course, anxiety and depression as well. That's why we call sleep the make or break of mental health. It's so easy to feel mentally unwell, and so hard to hit your mental health goals when you're not getting enough sleep. For the rest of today's episode, we're going to give you a few quick tips for getting enough sleep. Due to time constraints, we won't be taking a deep dive into these suggestions, but you can join us for our next episode, our Survivor's Sleep Toolbox, to get a much more thorough education on getting better sleep. For now, here's our top 3 suggestions. Number 1, have a sleep routine. The part of the brain in charge of putting you to sleep loves patterns and routines. That's why you tend to feel tired around the same time every night, and why you tend to wake up about the same time every morning. Fun fact, it's also why you may use the bathroom about the same time every day. You can help your brain by setting a routine. Go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. For added sleep power, make a bedtime routine as well. For example, you might read for about 20 minutes, stretch, brush your teeth, then hit the sheets. Perform your pattern for enough nights, and your brain will get the message. When my body does XYZ, it's time to gear down for bed. Number 2, avoid foods that keep you up. There are some obvious foods and drinks that will keep you up at night. Perhaps the most famous is caffeine. Sleep experts recommend avoiding caffeine 6 to 8 hours before bedtime to help it clear out of your system before it's time to rest. There are some sneakier food culprits that may be keeping you up. Sugar and wine, for example, can make you feel tired and even help you fall asleep. But both substances will also inhibit you from getting deep sleep. Ever woke up after about 8 hours of slumber and wonder why you're still tired? It could be that your body didn't enter many deep rest cycles, like REM. To avoid getting low-quality sleep, stay away from alcohol and sugar when bedtime is approaching. Number 3, practice stress reduction. Stress reduction right before bed is a huge advantage to getting quality sleep. But you don't have to wait for bedtime to get this sleep advantage. Plenty of research shows that getting good exercise during the day reduces stress and improves sleep quality. Other stress busters like meditation and breathing exercises can be done almost anytime to help you keep your stress levels low. And they're easy to accomplish in bed. To bust the bedtime blues, you may also want to consider getting away from some of the things that stress you during the day, such as a toxic relationship, distressing news outlets, or even a career that might need some changing. So folks, there it is, our top 3 tips on getting quality sleep. Again, if this topic interests you, we highly recommend you tune into our next episode, The Survivor's Sleep Toolbox, where we'll go deeper into these suggestions and more. We'll discuss how they work and how you can try them yourself. We've also got a fun giveaway in our next episode where each listener will get a chance to win a free copy of SGH's first audiobook. Grown-ups need bedtime stories too. Stories, meditations, and science-backed strategies to help you take back bedtime. Okay, everybody, We're nearing the end of today's episode, but first, it's time for the Silver Liners Challenge. This challenge, as you may have heard, is designed to be a simple, actionable task that you can accomplish to improve your mental health before we even get to our next episode. Ready? This month's Silver Liners Challenge is practice one technique to help improve your sleep. We will follow up with how you did in our next episode. In the meantime, if you'd like to review any of the resources we used to develop today's episode, you can find most of them in this week's show notes. As per our transparency policy, we want you to know that most of our information on the Peter Tripp story came from online articles. We prefer to get our info from primary sources, but we had a tough time digging up a first-hand account of Peter's Wakeathon. Peter's story is well known, and you can still find it in modern psychology textbooks. Any direct quotes from Peter in this article were inferred from online information. They are not verbatim quotes. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us at www.pjvoiceover.com/SGH. Thanks again for listening, everyone. We really hope to see you again next week to unpack our Survivor's Sleep Toolbox. In the meantime, we're thrilled to give you one of our favorite parts of our show, the cheesy joke of the week. This one is for you insomniacs out there. I finally got 8 hours of sleep. It took me 3 days, but whatever. That's it for now, guys. Until next time!